Ace Attorney Investigations is the most divisive game in the Ace Attorney series. It definitely has its own little subsidiary in the fandom, but I find the general outlook on the game is that it's either mediocre or just flat out bad. But personally, this game is special to me. It's not my favorite game in the series, no, that title belongs to its sequel. But to say this game played a vital role in making me the person I am today would be a complete and utter understatement. Sure, this game is by no means the masterpiece that its sequel absolutely is, but Investigations 2 could have never existed without the amazing foundation this game lays, both in terms of gameplay, characters, story, and the seeds it plans for Edgeworth's development in the sequel. Investigations is most known for its unique take on the gameplay formula used in Ace Attorney, specifically in terms of the investigation segments. Who would have fucking guessed? Instead of just pointing at locations on a screen like the mainline titles, the game takes place from a third-person perspective, where you walk around crime scenes and inspect things directly. This also means that the game does away with the location selector, with the game either just bringing you where you need to be on its own or letting you walk to the location. It's a matter of personal preference, but this is a system I vastly prefer. For one, you get these little mini-sprites of the characters doing all their actions, which is scientifically proven to be cool as fuck. But being able to walk around the scene and talk to characters at your leisure instead of them just being right dead center on the screen feels a bit grounding, if that makes sense. And it also allows more characters to be in an area at a time without needing to hide most of them. Another subtle change this game makes that I like a lot is allowing two characters to be on screen at a time during close-up segments, as well as allowing them to take different positions on the screen. It's a simple change, but it's nice to be able to have a conversation between two characters without them repeatedly needing to appear and disappear. And I also like being able to see Edgeworth's reactions as he talks to people instead of it just being from his perspective like it would be in the mainline titles. Would his icy glares really hit as hard if you couldn't see them for yourself? Another notable gameplay change here is the addition of logic, because God knows these games typically don't operate based on logic. Basically, as you investigate the scene, certain facts and questions won't be added to your organizer, but to a logic menu. And as you continue your investigation, you'll find different pieces of logic that connect to each other. And as you make connections between them, new information arises. It can be a little confusing at times. Sometimes things that feel like they should connect just don't. Then you realize you're a step ahead and you need to connect it to this other thing first. But overall, I think it's a solid addition. I think it helps integrate those little satisfying moments of realization you get in the courtroom into the investigation segments. Before I get too far into talking about the game itself, I want to take some time real quick to talk about the visuals and music. The footage used in this video is of the recently released Ace Attorney Investigations collection, which has completely redrawn art for all the mini sprites, and I think they generally look great, though it works better on some characters than others. With more cute characters, like Kay for instance, it works incredibly well, but I think it looks a tad off with someone like, say, Edgeworth. Nothing you won't get used to after a while, though. The collection also gives you the option to use the original sprites, but they have the ugly Mixel outlines from the mobile version. Ugh. The original sprites are really well done, but I couldn't recommend them over the redrawn ones here unless you can get used to the Mixels. As for the close-up sprites, they're really fucking well done. Some of, if not the best 2D art in the series, if you ask me. It makes the trilogy art looks even more dated by comparison. Just look at the art for Manfred between the two collections. This trilogy sprite is fucking hideous. Musically, this game is fucking outstanding. The DS era of Ace Attorney music in general is built different, but this might be my favorite game of the era in terms of music, though its sequel is quite close in that regard. The Pursuit theme is one of the best in the series, all the character themes are great, and the investigation music is sublime as well. Sometimes I just put on headphones while walking somewhere and listen to the initial investigation theme so I can truly feel like Miles Edgeworth. So cool, we've got a good foundation that expands on the standard Ace Attorney formula, and we've got kick-ass visuals and music. But we all know those aren't the factors that really make an Ace Attorney game special. The thing I've always found really makes or breaks an Ace Attorney game is its characters, and I'm gonna be bold enough to say that this game's cast of characters is one of the best this series has to offer. As everyone knows, this game centers around the fan-favorite prosecutor Miles Edgeworth, and he already has a wide cast of characters with close relations to him, such as Dick Gumshoe or Franziska von Karma. But where I think this game really shines is with its original characters. Two immediately come to mind, which play off of Miles' character in different ways, and each tie into a different part of the game's overarching narrative. Kay Faraday and Shi-Long. Let's talk about Kay Faraday first, because she's my favorite character of all time. Could you tell from my channel layout? Or the fact I use her as my avatar? Or from the fact I literally named myself after her? Kay Faraday is the self-proclaimed second great thief Yata-Garasu, adopting the title from her late father, Bern Faraday, a victim in a case Edgeworth worked on in the past. After finding a journal proving that her father was the original Yata-Garasu, she tracked down Edgeworth to get his help in capturing her father's killer. who she believes to be the fake Yatagarasu who's been making the news recently. She's essentially Edgeworth's assistant character in this game. Just as a quick explanation for those who haven't played the game, the Yatagarasu is a thief which finds and makes public evidence of corrupt dealings from corporations. Basically, their goal is to expose crimes that the legal system alone fails to. Which ties into this duology's general theme of the law not being entirely absolute, which you see a lot more of come the sequel. Kay is really only a thief in title, since she's never actually stolen anything, and she's only really interested in stealing the truth. Or so she wants us to believe. On a surface level, Kay is very clearly meant to contrast Edgeworth. While he's often colder, serious, and sometimes intimidating, Kay is theatrical, energetic, cheeky, and she constantly cracks jokes about stealing things, or pokes fun at Edgeworth's serious demeanor, both much to his dismay. This contrast is important, and is a massive part of what makes their dynamic so interesting. She balances out his personality, and in turn makes the investigations much less dull. As Edgeworth himself puts it, she definitely brings a decidedly different atmosphere to a criminal investigation. I need the record to show it took me like 30 tries to read Edgeworth's pompous-ass line. While they are clearly meant to contrast each other in terms of personality, they also parallel each other in many ways. Both of them lost their fathers in the courtroom. Both of them are driven by their desire to find the truth, which is the fact that brings Edgeworth to allow Kay to assist them during investigations. And in spite of their contrast, they also share an incredibly strong bond. Literal minutes after meeting her again, Edgeworth nearly has a heart attack thinking Kay hurt herself when she slipped off a ladder. And Kay describes Edgeworth as a hero on multiple occasions. And at one point she even says that he reminds her of her own father. Their dynamic makes me insane. I am not normal about these two at all. Something else I noticed over the course of the duology is she has a tendency to brush off people's, especially Edgeworth's, concern for her, which becomes especially apparent come the second game, but I'm getting really off topic here. I could honestly ramble about Kay all day. I literally have a Google Doc documenting every little fact that comes up about her in these games, but I'll leave it at that for now. I'm starting to think I just like this game because I'm completely and utterly insane about Kay Faraday. Huh. Interpol Agent Lang! He's also designed to contrast Edgeworth, but in a completely different way to how Kay does. He's a high-ranking investigator from Zangfa who's in the process of taking down a massive smuggling ring which is fucking up his country's economy. He holds a strong disdain for prosecutors and the court system, believing them to twist the truth. This is something that's explained further in the sequel, but for now you just need to know this guy fucking hates prosecutors, so he's not big on letting Mr. Edgeworth mosey around at his crime scene. He's very condescending towards Miles, to the point he literally calls him when he's been kidnapped just to tell him that he's not gonna rescue his ass, which is funny as fuck. Interestingly, this hatred for prosecutors doesn't seem to apply to Franziska, which he actively works with and respects. Maybe he respects her because of the undermining she faced in the law force, being such a young prosecutor and in the shadow of her father's legacy. Or maybe they just bonded over bullying Edgeworth, who knows. I also feel like there's something of a parallel between Lang's method of arresting every suspicious person with little investigation to keep crime off the streets, and the Von Karma way of getting every defendant declared guilty. It's a bit different, of course. Von Karma would literally forge evidence and force confessions, but on replay I thought it was reminiscent of that ideology. And I wonder if that was intentional, making Edgeworth face his past ideologies in some sense. Ironically, in spite of hating prosecutors, he kinda serves to fill the role one would normally take in these games. The guy who rips your theories apart and destroys your hopes and dreams. It's a familiar trope, but handled in a very different way, since obviously you're playing as the prosecutor this time around. A complaint I hear a lot about this game is that it takes too long to introduce some of these key characters. Since in spite of being integral to the game's overarching plot, Kay and Lang only finally show up in Case 3. And while I do understand this reasoning, I think it's less of a problem than it sounds like, considering the first two cases only take like a combined 3 or 4 hours to get through. It's not like those first two cases have nothing to do with the overarching plot. Case 1 sets up the KGA incident in the Yatagarasu almost immediately. And Case 2 introduces you to the smuggling ring that Shi-Long Lang is trying to take down, so it doesn't just come out of nowhere once you meet him. You witness it firsthand, so you have a better idea of what he's all about when he shows up. You've already had a whole case exposing a member of said smuggling ring, which makes it feel much more significant. As much as I love Kay and Lang, the first two cases definitely have their place in setting up their first appearances, and I don't think introducing them sooner would benefit the game. And on top of that, cases 1 and 2 are already fun as is in my opinion. Portsmouth is fun for a first case villain, and having an actual investigation segment in the first case is greatly to this game's benefit in my opinion, since the lack of one in the mainline title's first cases usually makes them feel a bit half-baked. It's contained in just 2 rooms to keep things simple since the first case, and I think making the scene Edgeworth's office is a creative way of handling that. It makes for a memorable, small crime scene, perfect for the opening case. And Case 2 has a fun setting as well, with the murder taking place during a flight, and the on-flight turbulence being a factor in the case. Rhoda and Cammy are both fun characters, though I don't really like Zinc LeBlanc. The part where seeing him falling makes Edgeworth realize the method of murder is funny as hell, though. Another complaint I usually see regarding this game, the sole thing that gets brought up again and again when the topic of this game is brought up, is the so-called abysmal pacing. And to that, I raise one question. Did we play the same game? Investigations 1 has some of the shortest cases in the whole series. Ignoring the final case, the average case length is what, fucking 2.5, 3 hours? It's one of the only ace-turning games where I feel like the investigation segments don't overstay their welcome whatsoever, so I honestly don't really know where people are coming from when they say these segments drag on. The final case is around 7 hours or so, sure, but that's still shorter than the final cases of Ace Attorney 2 and 3. I guess maybe the complaint comes from the final case being disproportionately long compared to the others, but nobody complains about 6-5 being 14 hours, so until I hear y'all talking about that, I'm not letting you give investigation shit. I do want to touch on an aspect of the game that I do think is a bit iffy, though. The game has two major plot lines, as I alluded to before. The Yatagarasu plotline and the Smuggling Ring plotline. And I personally found the Yatagarasu plotline infinitely more engaging than the Smuggling Ring. And I know I'm not alone in this. I ran a survey on Twitter to gauge general opinions on this game and its individual cases, and the single case that focuses almost entirely on the Yatagarasu plotline scored by far the highest, at 8.65 out of 10, with almost every vote being an 8, 9, or 10. Whilst every other case, which focuses more so on the Smuggling Ring, couldn't even average out to a 7. And the vast majority of complaints about the final case, Turnabout Ablaze, mention the fact that they find the villain of the Yatagarasu plotline infinitely more engaging than the main villain, and that the case falls off when he shows up. Now, I'm about to spoil the game's main villain, so if you haven't played the game, skip to the timestamp on screen. You gone? Okay. The villain of the Yatagarasu plotline, Sheena, is incredibly present throughout the game. She's the one who murdered Kay's father. She's one of the 3 members of the original Yatagarasu. She tried to fucking shoot Edgeworth, and she managed to escape, and she's been working as Blank Secretary under a new name, hiding in plain sight. She's an incredibly well done villain, honestly one of the best in the series in my opinion. Then in the final case, when you're finally taking her down, it's revealed the actual main villain is this random fuck-ass old man who controls the Smuggling Ring. Sheena has so much more of a connection to the main cast. I feel like the game would have benefited from her just being the main villain, instead of an underling to the fucking wise mystical tree over here, whose connection to the main cast is roughly fuck all. I mean, sure, he's behind the KG-8 incident, the death of Kay's father, but he doesn't feel present at all because he only shows up and becomes relevant in the final case. It's just weird as hell to me that they have this frankly amazing, super present villain with direct connections to both the original Yatagarasu and the Smuggling Ring, who's directly acquainted with the main characters, and they decide to make the last 2 hours of the final case revolve around Tree Man over here and whether or not he was taking his shit at the time of the murder. Granted, the cross-examination where you're trying to get this guy convicted is so out there, I honestly find it kind of hilarious. It gets to a point where he's trying to prove he's a fake Steel Samurai fan, so he has to be the killer. It's certainly a unique final culprit. But yeah, almost every complaint here was something along the lines of, Sheena was a more interesting villain. The ending drags, but every part before that was amazing. Extraterritorial rights. I left in the middle of Alba's testimony to go to a Christmas party and came back at 11 p.m. to finish and just cry. What the fuck was that last one? Now, I know I've been talking a lot about the flaws of the game here. And yeah, I can acknowledge the game isn't perfect. I have some other complaints too. Some of the cross-examinations in the Kidnap Turnabout make no sense to me. Plus the villain in that case is just kinda boring. So why is it that this is still my second favorite game in the whole series? Why can I look past these flaws? Well, I think whether or not you're gonna like investigations really depends on what you look for in these games. Like I said earlier, the thing that really makes or breaks an Ace Attorney game for me is its characters. Their interactions, how they bounce off of each other, the unique dynamics between them. Sure, the villain in the Kidnap Turnabout isn't too compelling to me, but the banter between Edgeworth and Kay, the tension between Miles and Lang, that's what I'm really there for. And that aspect is what Investigations, even at its absolute lowest points, does masterfully. I genuinely enjoyed the Kidnap Turnabout more than the vast majority of Trilogy cases for that very reason. It does the characters so damn well. If I wasn't so obsessed with these character dynamics, yeah, maybe I'd be in the same boat as the majority and think this was a pretty lame case. But I think about this case, and I don't think about the Smuggling Ring. I think about Edgeworth and Kay meeting, Kay assigning herself the role of his assistant and Miles eventually deciding to just go along with it. Gumshoe's reaction to Kay stealing his role. Kay making fun of Edgeworth's facial expressions and stealing his lines. I think about Kay coming in when all hope seems lost to give Edgeworth the idea to use Little Thief to investigate the haunted house. I think about Edgeworth's strong opposition to Lang's ideologies, Lang's intense hatred for prosecutors, Lang blaming Edgeworth for the death of one of his men. I think of Lang calling Kay a little crow girl and her snapping back and comparing him to a whimpering dog. I think of Edgeworth panicking when he thinks Kay hurt herself on that ladder, or him being impressed with Kay's craftsmanship when he finds out that she made her scarf herself. I think of Kay sympathizing with Lauren losing her father since she lost her own. The mystery itself might just be decent, but Investigations is special to me because of its cast. Not that the plot doesn't matter, of course, that's why Investigations 2 is so dramatically better than this game. It takes the strengths of Investigations 1 and plays it in a game with the best overarching plot in the series. But Investigations 2 couldn't have existed without the groundwork this game lays. You couldn't have a Turnabout Forsaken if you didn't have Turnabout Reminiscence to introduce you to Kay's father and her promises to him. You couldn't have Turnabout for the Ages or Lang's arc in Investigations 2 if you didn't have the Kidnapped Turnabout or Turnabout Ablaze to introduce Lang and his values. And Edgeworth growing to appreciate the people around him more, him putting everything on the line for the people he cares about, wouldn't hit nearly as hard if you didn't have a whole game prior to build those connections. Whether you like Investigations 1 or not, this game's foundation is what enables Investigations 2 to be the masterpiece that it is. And I think it deserves more respect for that. Also, man, for fuck's sakes, the pacing isn't that bad, guys. You guys are making shit up. I've seen people complain about Turnabout Airlines being tedious. I finished it in 87 minutes.